So let's start with that. The South African Broadcasting Corporation's board and executive were expected to brief the National Council of Provinces Select Committee on Public Enterprises and Communications today. That briefing never happened, though. MPs are fuming that neither the minister nor deputy minister as political heads appeared. The SABC falls under the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, and both the minister and deputy minister sent apologies. Yesterday, the SABC was questioned about increases in the remuneration of some group execs. This while the public broadcaster clocked up irregular, wasteful and fruitless expenditure in total of over 2 billion for the financial year 2020-21. So that is a historic figure. The SABC posting a loss for the recent year of 201 million. This was a billion, which was significantly lower than losses in previous years. But the Auditor General says it is doubtful the SABC can remain operational. To discuss, we're joined by the CEO of the SABC Madoda Mxakwe. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Mxakwe. And so many questions for you. I know you want to clarify the finances. You have been on a mission to do so. But firstly, was it very tense today?
Indeed. I think the key issue for us is if you look at the annual report for 2022, it does indicate that the turnaround plan that we started implementing 4 years ago is beginning to bear fruits. You may have seen in terms of the financials, we were able to increase revenue by 2%. In actual value, that's about 90 million. What is also important is that from a net loss point of view, year on year, we're seeing significant decrease. You may recall that in 2017, we were just over 1 billion net losses. We reduced that the following year to about 800 million, and then it came to 500, and now we're sitting at about 201 million net losses. And I think it's also important to give context to that. We had to acquire sports rights in terms of Olympics, which is a public obligation from a public mandate point of view. And if it were not for that, because that accounts for about 58% of the 201 million, we would have been able to be near break even or even profitable.
Yeah.
I think that for me is very key, because turning around an entity, it takes time. And year on year, we've seen a significant improvement in terms of the key business indicators.
So let's just look at the broad figures. You're saying a loss of 201 is much less than a loss of 500. So that's the improvement. But it depends on how you look at it. Years ago, people remember you talking about a turnaround plan, even talking about eventual growth. Last year, there was talk of breaking even in 2023. So maybe things are looking a little bit better, but the Auditor General is questioning right now whether SABC is a going concern. You're still in the red when you were talking about growth.
Turning around an entity takes time. It's not an overnight thing. Year on year, you need to see incremental improvements. And in all of the indicators for us, we are beginning to see that. I'll give you an example. The turnaround plan was segmented into 3 interrelated phases. The first one was the stabilization phase, where we looked at all of the legacy governance failures, which we were able to deal with. The second one was to go through a business transformation, where you talk about introducing and developing a new target operating model, new structure, new revenue sales models, which we have done. Now we want to move towards what we call the growth phase, where we're going to have to improve profitability as well as our going concern status.
I think last year you said that 93% was complete in terms of that turnaround. So 93% is complete. 93%, and the Auditor General is still saying the SABC may not be a going concern. You're still reporting losses. You're still not reporting any growth.
Under the turnaround plan, we had about 120 activities that we needed to complete. Currently, we're standing at about 98% completion. And this is part of ensuring that we repurpose the SABC. And I do think that you need to contextualize this. We inherited an organization that was hollowed out and systematically destroyed. And what the new board and the new executives did was to work with all the employees of the SABC in order to rebuild. And unfortunately, in the rush for headlines, we have a tendency not to see the overall picture that turning around an entity, it takes time. Look at Telkom. It was not an overnight thing.
But my question, in terms of your own timelines, in terms of your own promises, in terms of your own plans, would you not concede that you're years behind?
No, we're not.
Is breaking even in 2023 a possibility, right?
It is a possibility as long as we can work together as SABC employees. But I also need to caution. One of the biggest challenges we have is the cost of the unfunded public mandate. The news division alone, it's a 1 billion operation, and we're not expected to get any revenue in return. The acquisition of sports rights, it's about 500 million a year. So overall, the SABC is spending over 1.5 billion on the cost of the public mandate. And unfortunately, as you very well know, only 3% of that comes from government.
Yeah.
We're going to be preparing for elections. That cost is actually borne by us. Every single thing, when you have to tell the stories of all South Africans in various townships and rural areas, that fund is carried by us.
But wasn't restructuring about fixing that? Didn't you have an opportunity to present a viable funding model and do it over recent years?
We have. The biggest issue we have is the constraints around legislation and regulations. And this is something that we have been engaging with ICASA as well as the shareholder on, and we're hoping that this will bear fruits.
For some people, it makes them feel like they're in the twilight zone. The Auditor General is saying the SABC may not be a going concern. You're saying everything is on track and it's wonderful. Are we not sitting in a studio here of a sinking ship?
Let's talk about irregular expenditure. And you need to again contextualize this. In 2017, it was standing at a staggering 730 million rands. The following year, we reduced this to about 530. It went down to 500 million. And for the past fiscal, which is 2022, it was about 90 million. In fact, 70% of that 90 million can actually be attributed to the previous historical transactions and issues. So that is improvement. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure in 2020 were at 27 million. We reduced it to about 21. In the past fiscal, as in line with the annual report, we're standing at 10 million. So all the indicators are showing a ship that is turning around. And unfortunately, it's not an overnight thing to turn around an entity.
But 90 million, 10 million, whatever the figures are, why is it still happening? You also have that historic, fruitless, wasteful, irregular expenditure, mainly irregular, that I think the AG was concerned about. And it seems like you haven't been able to get on top of the finances after several years.
We have. If you see the improvement on the financial indicators, we're actually going through the right path. The issue, as I keep going back to, it's not an overnight thing. You need to look, for example, at the business processes. You need to look at the operations. You need to look at all of the legacy issues that we have had to deal with.
The wasteful expenditure, it seems less ominous. Sometimes it's, okay, we spent on things that didn't bear fruit. In the SABC's case, it sounds like that is on content that nobody wants to watch or what can't be sold. Surely that is a key performance indicator of this organization, if it was functioning well, buying the right content, putting the right things out that people want to watch.
Again, it's about agility and competitiveness. The PFMA and all the associated regulations, they inhibit us from a speed point of view, speed to market, quicker turnaround times. I'll give you an example. Almost all of the television programs that are going to the various platforms of our competitors, they started here. The reason is that it takes us much longer to approve these properties. You may recall this, in 2018, we had a 5-year exemption in terms of acquiring content. Unfortunately, literally for the past 4 years, we've been operating without any exemption when it comes to acquiring content. It makes us slower, we are not quick to market, and all of these things that we need to do, they are hampered because of that. Fortunately, in April, we got a provisional exemption when it comes to content acquisition, but it's only for 12 months, which is not enough. It is important for us to be unencumbered from all of the constraints that the regulations and the legislations bring to bear for the SABC.
Well, given what happened with MPs today, what's your relationship like with the minister? Because it sounds like to get over hurdles, You have to have a good relationship with government. She was threatening to declare the board delinquent a while ago, rubbishing the turnaround plan. There's a lot of distrust.
I do not know about that. I do know that we have a very good working relationship with the board that has been extremely supportive and that gave the required thought leadership in turning around this institution. The shareholder is extremely supportive of what we are doing. I do not know when...
The minister?
The minister is...
Do you have regular contact with the minister? How does that relationship
Remember,
work? So it goes through the board?
report to the board, and it's the chairperson of the board that has those interactions with the shareholder.
So please explain, because reports came out saying that she wanted to declare the board delinquent. I think that was mainly around wanting an update on revenue that didn't come in July.
The letter that I saw, it never specified or it never said that the minister wants to declare the board delinquent.
Okay, so those are media reports. Was that revenue update given to the minister? She was saying she was waiting for information.
Yes, we have developed a revenue improvement plan which looks at the critical path for the next 6 months in terms of how we can accelerate revenue growth.
Okay, so she was worried about that. She also said the SABC had failed to optimize the opportunities brought by digital migration and to monetize channels such as SABC Sport and SABC Education.
These are some of the things.
She was expressing concern there.
Yeah, correct. These are some of the items that are part of our strategy. Unfortunately, because it's a commercially sensitive issue, I cannot be discussing our strategy when it comes to digitization on national platforms.
Well, can you respond to that claim that the SABC is not optimizing opportunities brought by digitization?
We have the plans and we are indeed implementing it. And
when will we feel them or see them?
It takes time. It takes time, Francis. And I think you also need to appreciate again the organization that we inherited a couple of years ago. And every single thing that we're doing, I have a very competent ethical team that I work with. Because some of the things that are made about irregular or wasteful, people tend to think that there's issues of corruption. I can assure the public that I work with an ethical, competent management team that has decided to do what it needs to rebuild this organization.
The board is leaving, so that creates an uncertain situation. What will happen when the new board comes in? Are you privy to who those board members will be?
No, that's outside of my ambit. All I know is that as the executive team, as EXCO, as SABC employees, will continue to work together to fulfill the public mandate of the SABC.
The ministers not arriving today, the minister and deputy minister, was that a disappointment? You couldn't present your turnaround. Did you buy their excuses that the MPs didn't like?
Well, I would not know. I mean, all we do is to present ourselves to these various forums so that we can present the strategies of the SABC.
Okay, were you disappointed? You couldn't tell the MPs that things are getting better because all the news publicly is bad news.
We had already shared the strategy. We had shared the turnaround plans. So for us, we were given an opportunity to come and interact, and I do know that there will be another opportunity. So it's not a big deal for us.
All right, so you've responded to the concerns that the relationship with government is bad, that the SABC is in a bad state after what the Auditor General said. What about the relationship with staff? Have you received a strike certificate? There has been a strike brewing.
Correct, there has been. You must also understand that both parties have gone to the CCMA, and there are processes underway. I would not want to even discuss those on this platform until such time that process has been finalized.
You were asked to discuss why some execs got increases, and you gave some examples there. Why the head of legal, you said that the leave dispensation had changed. The head of sales, you said that there had been commission. Can you categorically say you're not finding creative ways of giving high-ranking officials great increases while everybody else's salaries are basically stagnant?
We're guided by the values of transparency, integrity and trust. We would never do that to SABC employees. I can categorically state that no executive has received any increase.
If there's a strike, finally, what will the impact be?
We will engage.
And what are you doing? I mean, part of the turnaround was creating great morale and changing the culture and getting staff behind you, not opposed to you.
we're doing that. What we cannot allow is a situation where we increase the cost base again. We engage with all stakeholders in good faith. And in terms of entrenching values and behaviors that are needed, we are doing those programs all throughout.
All right, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
That was the CEO of the SABC Madoda Mxakwe.